The Great Chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest building ever made by any species in known space. Its walls rose so high that clouds sometimes formed near the ceiling. Lights from 1,000 worlds decorated its dome like artificial stars. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated areas, each section designed to meet the physical needs of beings that breathed different gases, required different temperatures, or saw in different spectrums of light. Ambassador Daniel Harper had walked through these halls for 15 years. He knew every corner, every hidden room, every shortcut between the meeting chambers. He had made friends here. He had negotiated treaties that saved millions of lives. He had believed, truly believed, that the Galactic Council represented the best hope for lasting peace among the stars. Today, that belief died. He stood at the central podium, the place reserved for species addressing the full council. Behind him sat Admiral in her formal uniform, her silver hair pulled back tightly, her face showing nothing. Beside her was Commander Price, younger and less practiced at hiding his emotions. His hands were clenched into fists under the table. The High Arbiter of the Dominion towered above them all. Was a creature, nearly 3 meters tall, with a hard shell that gleamed like polished metal and compound eyes that reflected the chamber lights in 1,000 fractured images. His species had been among the founding members of the Council. They considered themselves the natural leaders of galactic civilization. Held a document in his upper hands. The paper was ceremonial, a tradition from species that had developed writing long before humans learned to make fire. But the words on it were not ceremonial at all. "The Council has reached a decision regarding the human question," announced. His voice was translated instantly into every language present, but Daniel could hear the original clicking and buzzing underneath the translated words. It sounded like satisfaction. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. The human question, as if 300 years of partnership, sacrifice, and cooperation could be reduced to a question that needed answering. "Humanity has grown beyond acceptable limits," continued. "Your population expands too quickly. Your military has become too powerful. Your influence has spread too far. The Council has determined that corrections must be made for the stability of the galactic community." The other representatives watched in silence. Some looked uncomfortable, others looked eager. A few would not meet Daniel's eyes at all. "The terms are as follows," unfolded the document fully. "First, humanity will transfer command of its military fleet to a joint council oversight committee. Your ships will operate under council authority. Your officers will report to council commanders." Admiral did not move. Her expression did not change, but Daniel knew her well enough to see the storm building behind her eyes. "Second, humanity will submit to population management protocols. Birth rates will be reduced to council-approved levels. Excess population will be humanely managed through approved methods." Daniel heard Price make a sound behind him. It might have been a word he swallowed before it could escape. "Third, humanity will vacate 17 of its 23 colony worlds within 1 standard galactic year. These worlds will be redistributed to species with greater historical claims to the territories." The chamber remained silent. 47 species, thousands of representatives, and not one voice rose in protest. Daniel looked around the room. He saw the delegation, whose had been saved from a plague by human doctors. They said nothing. He saw the collective, whose trade routes had been protected by human warships for a century. They looked away. He saw the, whose art and culture had been preserved in human museums when their own world was nearly destroyed. They studied their notes as if the ceiling might collapse if they made eye contact. 300 years. Humanity had given 300 years to this council. They had shared their technology freely. They had sent their sons and daughters to die in wars that were not their own. They had built, taught, healed, and defended. They had asked for nothing in return except respect and fair treatment. And this was the answer. "This is not a negotiation," added. His mandibles clicked in what Daniel now recognized as a smile. The council has voted. The decision is final. You will comply or you will face the consequences of defiance. We have the authority, we have the power, and we have the will to enforce our decisions. Daniel stood very still. He could feel the weight of every human watching this moment through the broadcast systems. Billions of people across 23 worlds were seeing their ambassador receive an ultimatum that would destroy everything they had built. He thought about what compliance would mean. Human children taken from their parents to meet population targets. Human soldiers serving under alien commanders who saw them as tools rather than allies. Human families forced from homes they had lived in for generations, sent into the unknown while other species claimed their lands. He thought about what defiance would mean. War against 47 species. Humanity alone against the entire galaxy. Blood and fire and death on a scale that would make every previous conflict look like a minor disagreement. And then he thought about a third option, one that no species had ever chosen before, one that the Council had never even considered as a possibility. He turned to look at Admiral. She gave him the smallest nod. He turned to look at Commander Price. The young man's eyes were hard but clear. Daniel turned back to face the council. When he spoke, his voice was calm. It carried no anger, no fear, no desperation. It was the voice of a man stating a simple fact. The council has made its position clear, he said. Humanity has listened. Humanity has understood. And now humanity will give its answer. He paused. The silence in the chamber was absolute. We will not comply with these terms. We will not submit to population controls. We will not surrender our fleet. We will not abandon our homes. His mandibles spread wide in what might have been amusement. Then you choose war. How disappointing, how predictable, how human. No, Daniel said, we do not choose war. War would require us to care about what happens to you. War would mean we still believe this council is worth fighting over. He shook his head slowly. We do not choose war. We do not choose peace. We choose to leave. For a moment, no one understood. Every human in council space will return home, Daniel continued. Every ship, every scientist, every doctor, every teacher, every worker. We will take nothing that belongs to you. We will leave nothing that belongs to us. Within 1 month, there will not be a single human being in any territory controlled by the Galactic Council. He gathered the notes he would never use. He straightened his jacket. You wanted us gone. You wanted to control us or remove us. Congratulations. You have succeeded beyond your wildest dreams. He looked at with something that might have been pity. I hope you remember this moment when you realize what you have lost. Daniel Harper walked out of the chamber. Admiral and Commander Price followed without looking back. Behind them, the council erupted into chaos. But they were already gone, and they were never coming back. The news reached every human colony within 6 hours. It was the fastest any message had ever traveled across human space, faster even than the emergency protocols designed for war. Every screen, every communication device, every public broadcast system carried the same simple message. We are leaving. There was no panic. There were no protests. There were no demands for negotiation or calls for a different solution. 300 years of insults, small cruelties, and quiet discrimination had prepared humanity for this moment. The Council's ultimatum was simply the final proof of what many humans had long suspected. They had never truly been accepted. They had only been tolerated until they became too successful to ignore. Doctor received her orders while performing surgery on a patient. The procedure was delicate, a reconstruction of neural pathways that only human surgeons had mastered. Without this surgery, the patient would lose the ability to move the left side of his body. Finished the procedure, closed the incision, and walked directly to her office. Her supervisor was waiting for her. His name was difficult for human mouths to pronounce, so she had always called him Director. He had never objected to this. though she now wondered if he had resented it all along. "There must be some mistake," the director said. His translator gave his voice a calm, measured tone, but his antennae were trembling. "Your surgical team cannot leave. We have over 300 patients scheduled for procedures in the next month alone." Began packing her personal belongings. There were not many: a photograph of her family on Earth, a small plant that had somehow survived 3 years in artificial light, a coffee mug her daughter had painted for her birthday. "There is no mistake," she said. "All human medical personnel are returning home. You have 1 week to arrange alternative care for your patients." 1 week, the director's voice rose sharply. "That is impossible. The nearest non-human specialists in your procedures are months away. Our patients will die." Stopped packing. She looked at the director for a long moment. "Your government voted for this. Your representative stood in the council chamber and said nothing while the High Arbiter demanded control of our military, our population, our homes. Not one voice spoke in our defense." She closed her bag. "You made your choice. Now you live with the consequences. That is how choices work." The director tried to block her path. "You cannot do this. You have responsibilities. You took an oath to heal." "I took an oath to do no harm," corrected him. "I have never harmed a patient and I never will, but I am under no obligation to continue providing services to a government that considers my species an infestation to be controlled." She stepped around him. "Good luck finding surgeons. I understand they have a decent medical school. Their graduates might be ready in 10 or 15 years. Similar scenes played out across council space. On the agricultural world of Verdant 7, human farmers began harvesting their crops months ahead of schedule. They worked day and night, gathering everything they could carry. What they could not take, they left in neat piles at the edges of their fields with instructions on how to plant and harvest it. The local population watched in confusion. They had never learned to farm. Why would they need to when the humans did it so well? Captain Cole was 3 days from the border when he received the recall order. His ship, the Wandering Star, was a cargo vessel designed for long-haul transport between the outer colonies. He had spent 20 years building relationships with suppliers and customers across a dozen worlds. Now he was abandoning all of it. His first officer was unnamed. They had served together for 8 years, had saved his life twice, and had returned the favor 3 times. They were as close as 2 beings of different species could be. "I do not understand," said as they watched the cargo being unloaded at the last human station before the border. "This is your life, your work. You would give it all up because of politics." Leaned against the observation window, his reflection looked tired, older than he remembered. "It is not politics," he said. "Politics is arguing about tax rates and trade agreements. What happened in that council chamber was something else. They told us we were not welcome. They told us our children were a problem to be solved. They told us our homes belonged to other people." He shook his head. "That is not politics. That is a declaration that we do not matter." Was silent for a moment. His species had been among those who supported the ultimatum, the believed in hierarchy, in knowing one's place. Humans had never accepted their place, and it had always bothered the leadership. "What will happen to our partnership?" asked finally. "To our friendship?" Turned to face his old friend. There was no anger in his eyes. There was something worse. There was acceptance. "I will miss you," said simply, "but I cannot stay. My people need me, and yours made it very clear that we are not part of the same community anymore." He extended his hand in the human gesture of farewell. "I hope things work out for you. I really do." Took the hand. He did not know what else to do. The withdrawal continued with mechanical precision. Human engineers completed their current projects but refused to start new ones. Human teachers finished their lessons but did not return the next day. Human merchants sold their remaining inventory at fair prices and closed their shops forever. The council sent representatives to observe the process. They expected chaos, resistance, perhaps even violence. Instead, they found something far more disturbing. They found calm acceptance and quiet efficiency. They found humans who smiled politely, answered questions honestly, and then continued packing their belongings. Ambassador Irving remained behind as the last official human presence in Council space. His job was to manage the transition, to answer questions, to smooth over any complications. He sat in the empty human embassy, surrounded by packed boxes and covered furniture, and waited. The first visitor was a diplomat named. She had been one of the loudest voices demanding human compliance. Now she stood in the echoing halls of the empty embassy with something like fear in her eyes. "This is a negotiating tactic," she said. "It was not a question, it was a desperate hope. You will return when we offer better terms." Shook his head. "There will be no negotiation. There will be no return. The Council made its decision and humanity has made ours." "But you need us," insisted. "Your economy depends on galactic trade. Your technology relies on shared research. Your security requires alliance protection." Laughed. It was not a happy sound. 300 years, he said. 300 years we gave you everything we had, our knowledge, our skills, our blood, and you never once asked what we were getting in return." He stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the last human transport was loading passengers for the journey home. "The truth is, Counselor, we never needed you. We stayed because we wanted to, because we believed in cooperation and mutual benefit and all those beautiful ideas the Council claims to represent." He turned back to face her. "You taught us that those beliefs were foolish, and now we are going home to build something better, something that does not include you." Opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. For the first time in her long career, she had absolutely nothing to say. Outside, the last transport lifted off. Within the hour, would board his own ship and follow it home. And then the Council would be alone, surrounded by the silence they had created, with no one to hear their regrets. 6 months passed, and the galaxy began to understand what it had lost. It started with small things. A water purification system on a colony stopped working, and no one knew how to fix it. The technology was human design, installed decades ago as part of a development aid program. The local engineers could operate it, but they had never learned to repair it. Why would they need to? The humans always came when something broke. Now the humans did not come. The water turned brown, then toxic. 50,000 had to be evacuated to overcrowded camps on the main continent, while officials searched desperately for someone who understood the machinery. A communication satellite failed. Then another. Then a dozen more. The satellites were old, installed during the early days of space exploration, but they had been upgraded repeatedly with human technology. Without human engineers to maintain them, the network began to collapse. By the end of the second month, they had lost contact with a third of their outer colonies. High Arbiter sat in his private chamber and reviewed the reports. Each one was worse than the last. Crop failures on agricultural worlds that had depended on human farming techniques. Medical crises in hospitals that had relied on human doctors. Economic collapse in trading hubs that had built their entire infrastructure around human commerce. He had expected problems. He had not expected catastrophe. "They are punishing us," he said to his advisor, a younger named. "This is revenge for the ultimatum." Shifted uncomfortably. "With respect, High Arbiter, I do not believe that is accurate. The humans are not doing anything to us. They are simply not doing anything for us anymore." "What is the difference?" "The difference," said carefully, "is that punishment requires effort. What the humans are doing requires none. They have simply stopped helping, and everything we built on their help is falling apart." His mandibles clicked in frustration. "Then we must force them to return, send a diplomatic mission, offer concessions, if necessary threaten military action." "We have tried diplomacy. Every message receives the same automated response. As for military action, paused. Our fleet commanders believe we would lose, badly. Impossible, we outnumber them significantly. In ships, yes, but our ships were designed to work alongside human vessels. Our tactics assumed human support. Our supply lines depended on human logistics. Pulled up a tactical display. Without those elements, our military advantage is largely theoretical. The humans, meanwhile, have spent 3 centuries learning how to fight alone if necessary. They are very good at it. The silence stretched for a long moment. Across council space, the silence was becoming deafening. The communication channels that once carried human voices were empty. The trade routes that human ships had traveled were quiet. The research stations that human scientists had staffed were dark. Counselor of the Collective walked through the corridors of the Grand Academy, once the greatest center of learning in the galaxy. Half the classrooms were closed. Half the laboratories were empty. Half the students had gone home because their programs could not continue without human instructors. She found herself standing in front of a display case in the main hall. Inside were artifacts from human history, tools, weapons, art, documents. A plaque below the case read, "Contributions of Humanity to Galactic Civilization." She had walked past this case 1,000 times and never really looked at it. Now she stood and read every label, examined every item, and tried to understand how one species had given so much to so many. A young student approached her. "Counselor, is it true that the humans are never coming back?" Did not answer for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was quieter than usual. "I do not know, I hope not, but I fear that even if they returned tomorrow, things would never be the same." "Why did they leave?" the student asked. It was the question everyone was asking now. The question that should have been asked before the ultimatum was ever written. "Because we forgot something important," said. "We forgot that cooperation is a choice, partnership is a gift, and respect is the price you pay to receive both." She looked at the display case one more time. "We stopped paying that price, and now we are learning what it truly cost." Ambassador Irving had stayed behind longer than any other human. His job was to manage the transition, but there was very little left to manage. The embassy was empty. The staff was gone. The furniture was covered with dust. He spent most of his days answering questions from desperate council representatives. They came one after another, each with the same urgent need. Could humans return to fix a failing reactor? Could humans send doctors to treat an epidemic? Could humans provide food for starving colonies? His answer was always the same: no. "You do not understand," an ambassador pleaded during one such meeting. "My people are dying. Our medical facilities cannot handle the outbreak without human support." Nodded sympathetically. "I understand completely. Your people are dying because your government decided that human population growth was a threat to be eliminated. Your people are dying because your representatives voted to strip us of our homes. Your people are dying because you stood silent while the High Arbiter threatened our children." The ambassador had no response. "I am sorry for your people," continued. "Truly I am. Humans are not monsters. We do not want anyone to suffer. But we also will not return to a system that treats us as servants to be used and then discarded. You wanted independence from human influence. Congratulations, you have it." The left without another word. That night sat alone in the empty embassy and composed his final report to Earth. The communication would take hours to reach its destination, bouncing through relay stations that humanity had built and now abandoned. "The situation continues to deteriorate," he wrote. "Council infrastructure is failing at an accelerating rate. Several species are facing genuine humanitarian crises. There have been calls for emergency intervention, but I have declined all requests per standing orders." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "I want to be clear about something for the historical record. The Council is not failing because humanity has chosen to harm them. The Council is failing because it was never as strong as it believed itself to be. For 3 centuries, humanity filled gaps that other species did not even know existed. We solved problems before they became crises. We built systems that worked so well that no one questioned how they worked. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. The Council did not understand what they had until it was gone. I suspect most of them still do not understand. They believe this is a negotiating tactic, a temporary disruption that will end when we get what we want. They do not realize that we already have what we want. We have our freedom. We have our dignity. We have each other. He saved the message and prepared it for transmission. Tomorrow I am returning home. I do not know if I will ever return to Council space. I do not know if any human ever will. But I know this. Whatever happens to the galaxy now, it is not our responsibility. We tried to help. We tried for 300 years. And when we asked for basic respect in return, we were told that our very existence was a problem to be solved. Irving sent the message and began packing his few remaining belongings. Outside his window, the lights of the Council Capitol flickered and dimmed. Somewhere, another human-designed system was failing. He did not look back as he left. The First War began 8 months after humanity left. It was not a surprise to anyone who understood the history of the galaxy. The and the had been rivals for thousands of years, long before either species had discovered space travel. They had fought dozens of wars over territory, resources, and ancient grudges that neither side fully remembered anymore. The only reason they had stopped fighting was the presence of human peacekeeping forces along their shared border. Now those forces were gone. The dispute started over a mining colony on a small moon in the neutral zone. Both species claimed it. Both species sent ships to enforce their claim. When the shooting started, there was no one to stop it. Commander Laura watched the distant flashes of weapons fire from the observation deck of Border Station 7. It was the outermost human military installation, positioned exactly at the edge of what was now officially Terran space. Beyond the invisible line she could see from her window, the galaxy burned. Lieutenant Tyler Grant stood beside her, monitoring the communication channels. His console was alive with desperate signals, distress calls, pleas for assistance, demands for intervention. "They are requesting emergency military support," he reported. "They say the fleet is twice the size they expected. They are offering a formal apology and full restoration of diplomatic ties in exchange for immediate assistance." Laura did not turn from the window, logged the request. "That is all. That is all." Tyler hesitated. He had served under commander for 3 years. He knew her well enough to recognize the tension in her shoulders, the careful control in her voice. She was not indifferent to what was happening. She was forcing herself to be indifferent. "Commander, if I may speak freely." "You may. Those are people dying out there. Soldiers, civilians, children. They are dying because we are not helping them." Laura finally turned to face him. Her eyes were tired but steady. "Lieutenant Grant, do you know why humanity joined the Galactic Council 300 years ago?" Tyler shook his head. "We joined because we believed in something. We believed that different species could work together for the common good. We believed that cooperation was better than conflict. We believed that if we gave enough, shared enough, helped enough, we would be accepted as equals." She walked to her console and pulled up the historical records. Images flashed across the screen. Human soldiers fighting and dying in foreign wars. Human doctors treating alien plagues. Human engineers building infrastructure on worlds that would never be their homes. "My grandmother served in the peace mission of 2847. She spent 4 years on that border, keeping those 2 species from destroying each other. She was injured twice. She watched friends die. And when she came home, the Council did not even send a message of thanks." Laura closed the files. We gave everything for 3 centuries, and when we asked for nothing more than respect, they tried to take our homes and control our children. So no, Lieutenant, we are not going to help them now. They made it very clear that they do not want our help. They just want our service, and that is not the same thing. The weapon's fire continued in the distance. Tyler returned to his station and logged the request as instructed. He said nothing more. On Earth, Admiral reviewed the daily intelligence reports in her office at Central Command. The walls were covered with screens showing activity across both human and former Council space. The contrast was striking. Human colonies were thriving. New construction projects had begun on every world. Research facilities were producing innovations at an unprecedented rate. The economy was booming as trade routes that once served alien interests were redirected to benefit humanity alone. Council space was collapsing. The war had spread to 9 systems. The collective was experiencing a famine that threatened to kill millions. The had fractured into competing factions that blamed each other for the disaster. Everywhere she looked, there was chaos. Her aide, Lieutenant Commander Chris, entered with a fresh stack of reports. Admiral, we have received 17 new requests for assistance today. They are asking for medical supplies. They want food shipments. They are requesting technical advisors to repair their power grid. And our response? The same as always. We acknowledge receipt and express sympathy. We do not provide assistance. Nodded slowly. She had given this order personally and she stood by it, but that did not make it easy. Chris, do you think we are doing the right thing? The question surprised him. Admiral rarely expressed doubt about anything. I think, he paused, choosing his words carefully. I think we are doing what we have to do. If we help them now, nothing changes. They learn that they can treat us however they want, and we will still come when they call. They learn that there are no consequences for their actions. And if we do not help, then people die, people who had no part in the Council's decision. Innocent people. Chris shrugged helplessly. There is no good answer, Admiral. There is only the answer that gives us the best chance of being treated fairly in the future, and that means proving that we mean what we say. Turned back to her screens. The war had claimed its first civilian population center. A city of 2 million had been destroyed in an orbital bombardment. She could see the smoke from the satellite images. My grandfather used to tell me that humans were special, she said quietly. Not better than other species, but different. We could forgive almost anything. We could find common ground with almost anyone. We could keep trying long after everyone else would have given up. She closed the image of the burning city. I used to think that was our greatest strength. Now I wonder if it was our greatest weakness. We forgave so much for so long that the galaxy forgot there was a limit to our patience. Chris had no answer for that. The war continued for 3 months before a ceasefire was finally negotiated. 3 worlds had been destroyed. 17 million people had died. The neutral zone that humanity had once protected was now a graveyard of broken ships and ruined colonies. And humanity had done nothing but watch. The Council sent a formal delegation to the human border, requesting a meeting to discuss terms for humanity's return. They brought gifts, rare materials, ancient artifacts, promises of reform. They brought apologies from a dozen species who had supported the ultimatum. The delegation was met by a mid-level diplomatic officer named Amy Porter. She accepted the gifts politely, listened to the apologies carefully, and then delivered humanity's response. We appreciate the Council's change of heart, she said. We recognize that recent events have demonstrated the value of human participation in galactic affairs. However, at this time, humanity has no interest in rejoining the Galactic Council or resuming previous relationships with member species. The lead diplomat, a elder named, could not hide his shock. But we are offering everything you asked for: full equality, permanent seats on all committees, Complete autonomy over your internal affairs. What more do you want? Amy smiled. It was not an unkind smile, but there was nothing warm in it either. With respect, counselor, you are still not understanding what happened. We did not leave because we wanted better terms. We left because we no longer wanted to be part of your system at all. You cannot give us what we want because what we want is to be left alone. She stood and gathered her materials. Humanity will maintain peaceful relations with any species that wishes it. We will trade fairly and communicate openly, but we will not return to the Council. We will not participate in your government, and we will not send our people to die in your wars ever again. Reached out as if to stop her. Please, you cannot abandon us like this. The galaxy needs humanity. Amy paused at the door. The galaxy had humanity for 3 centuries. It chose to throw us away. Now it must learn to survive without us. That is the consequence of choices, and choices once made cannot always be unmade. She left without looking back. The delegation returned to Council space with empty hands and emptier hopes, and humanity continued to build its future alone. 5 years had changed everything. The Galactic Council, once the most powerful organization in known space, existed now only in name. The Grand Chamber where had delivered his ultimatum stood empty and dark. Most of the member species had withdrawn, either unable to afford their dues or unwilling to participate in an institution that had proven itself worthless. The few who remained spent their time arguing about who was responsible for the collapse, accomplishing nothing while their civilizations crumbled around them. The Dominion had shattered into a dozen warring factions. Himself had died in a coup 18 months earlier, killed by his own people who blamed him for everything that had gone wrong. His successor lasted only 6 months before suffering the same fate. No one knew who ruled the anymore. Perhaps no one did. The Empire had contracted to a handful of core systems, abandoning their outer colonies when they could no longer afford to supply them. Millions of refugees wandered Council space, looking for homes that no longer existed. They had faced the worst of it. Without human agricultural technology, their food production had collapsed completely. 2/3 of their population had died in the famines. The survivors lived in scattered camps, dependent on charity from species that had little to spare. And humanity was thriving. President Pierce stood on the observation platform of the newly constructed Stellar Command Center, watching the traffic of ships moving through Earth orbit. There were hundreds of them: cargo vessels, passenger transports, scientific explorers, military escorts. 5 years ago, humanity had controlled 23 colony worlds. Now they controlled 37, with 12 more in various stages of development. Beside her stood Admiral, her uniform displaying ribbons from 3 decades of service. On her other side was Daniel Harper, the former ambassador who had walked out of the Council chamber and never returned. His hair had gone gray in the years since, but his eyes were still sharp. The reports from the Exploration Division are remarkable, said, reviewing the data on her personal display. We have discovered 17 habitable worlds beyond the old Council borders, resources beyond anything we imagined, opportunities that would have taken us centuries to find if we had stayed where we were. Necessity drives innovation, Daniel observed. When we could no longer depend on others, we learned to depend on ourselves. We built faster ships because we needed them. We developed better technology because we had no one else to provide it. We explored further because we had to find our own path. Nodded. Our military is stronger than it has ever been, not because we expected war, but because we understood that strength is the only language some species understand. The Council thought we were weak because we were kind. They confused patience with inability. They will not make that mistake again. An aide approached the group with a message tablet. Madam President, we have visitors arriving at the outer security perimeter. A delegation from what remains of the Council. Raised an eyebrow. What do they want this time? They are not requesting assistance, they are requesting admission. The three leaders exchanged looks. In 5 years, the Council had sent dozens of delegations asking humanity to return, to help, to save them. This was something different. Explain, said. The aide pulled up the full communication. The delegation includes representatives from and 8 other species. They are not asking us to rejoin the Council. They are asking if they can join us. They want to become part of human civilization. The silence stretched for a long moment. Daniel Harper was the first to speak. 5 years ago, they told us we were too numerous, too successful, too powerful. They demanded we surrender our fleet and abandon our homes. And now they want to live under our protection. The situation has changed, said. When you are starving and surrounded by enemies, the people you once looked down upon suddenly seem much more attractive. Walked to the edge of the observation platform and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, civilizations were dying because they had been too proud to treat humans as equals. Somewhere out there, species were learning the hard way that cooperation required mutual respect. Grant them permission to dock, she said finally. We will hear what they have to say. The delegation arrived the next morning. They came in old ships, poorly maintained, their hulls by years of neglect and conflict. The contrast with the gleaming human vessels that escorted them was stark and unmistakable. Met them in a conference room that overlooked Earth. The blue planet hung in the behind her, beautiful and peaceful, a reminder of everything humanity had built. The lead delegate was unnamed. Daniel recognized him immediately as the former first officer who had served with Captain Cole years ago. He looked older now, diminished somehow, as if the weight of everything that had happened was pressing down on him. Thank you for receiving us, said. His voice was quiet, without the characteristic arrogance. We come not to ask for charity or demand assistance. We come to acknowledge what we should have acknowledged long ago. He paused, gathering himself. Humanity was never the problem. Humanity was the solution. For 3 centuries you held us together, kept us fed, protected us from ourselves. And when you asked for nothing more than the respect you had earned, we tried to crush you. The other delegates nodded. Some could not meet the eyes of the humans in the room. We were wrong, continued. We were arrogant and blind and cruel. We do not deserve your forgiveness, and we do not ask for it. We ask only for the opportunity to prove that we can be better. We ask to join your society, not as masters or even as equals, but as students. We want to learn how to build what you have built. We want to understand how species can work together without domination and fear. Listened without interruption. When finished, she let the silence hold for a moment before responding. You speak of learning, she said, but learning requires accepting difficult truths. Are you prepared to hear them? Nodded. The truth is that we succeeded not because we are superior, but because we understood something you did not. Cooperation is not weakness. Sharing is not surrender. Helping others does not diminish yourself. Stood and walked closer to the delegation. We gave freely because giving made us stronger. We protected others because protection built trust. We shared our knowledge because knowledge grows when it spreads. She stopped in front of and looked into his eyes. You could have had all of this. You could have been our partners, our friends, our family among the stars. Instead, you chose fear and control and domination. And look where it brought you. Lowered his head. We know now. Turned and walked back to her place at the head of the table. The silence stretched until she finally spoke again. Humanity will accept your petition. You may settle in designated areas of human space. You may learn our ways and contribute to our society, but there will be conditions. She raised her hand before anyone could speak. You will come as individuals, not as governments. You will follow our laws and respect our customs. You will earn your place through work and cooperation, not through demands or entitlement. And most importantly, you will remember this moment. You will remember what happened when you forgot that respect is not given. It is earned. The delegation agreed to every condition without argument. They had no choice, and they knew it. As they left the conference room, Daniel Harper walked beside. The looked broken but somehow hopeful. "I remember you," Daniel said. "You served with Cole." Nodded. "He was a good man, a good friend. I think about him often. He is still alive, retired now, living on one of the outer colonies. He might be willing to see you if you asked." For the first time, something like light appeared in his eyes. "I would like that very much." Daniel smiled. It was a genuine smile, the first he had felt in years when dealing with a member of the council species. "That is the difference," he said quietly. "That is what you never understood. We were always willing to forgive. We were always ready to try again. You just had to ask us properly." He patted on the shoulder and walked away. Outside the window, humanity's ships continued their endless dance among the stars. And somewhere in the depths of space, a new chapter was beginning. Not of domination or revenge, but of rebuilding and hope. It would not be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever was. But for the first time since the council chamber and the ultimatum and the long years of silence, the future looked bright. Humanity had walked away from peace, and in doing so, they had found something better. They had found themselves,